That a man can say such things as infallible statements. This is not orthodox, this is heterodox. And that's the problem with the Catholic Church, is it's really just a big humanist institution. There was no Western attendance. It was presided over someone who was in schism with Rome, who died out of communion with Rome, and the Roman Catholic Church says no salvation outside the church. So how exactly does that work? They were waiting for the Pope's magic signature, even though there was no Western attendance. You can also look at Trullo. There's many examples of, they weren't just waiting for the Pope's signature to magically make it an ecumenical council. You can also look at a third ecumenical council where there is no Western attendance. They weren't like, guys, we need the Bishop of Rome to sign up. We need the Bishop of Rome.
First off, the First Council of Constantinople was not the Third Ecumenical Council, was the second. It's right there in the screenshot. Second, the Wikipedia article says directly that the First Council of Constantinople was not seen as an ecumenical council until Chalcedon. If one wants to see how devastating this is to Kyle's claims, here's a fantastic video between two Catholics and an Oriental Orthodox who agree that Chalcedon was a clear example of the Pope exercising papal supremacy. Finally, Theodoret, who preserved a synodical letter from the council, records that the council fathers in 381 did want to have the council in Rome, but due to justified reasons, they had to keep the council in Constantinople. This at least shows they had some assent from the Pope, as it states.
So, as we have already said, we needs must labor all the longer. Since, however, you showed your brotherly love to us, by inviting us, as though we were your own members, by the letters of our most religious emperor to the synod, which you are gathering by divine permission at Rome.
However, Kyle isn't getting off this easy. It's super clear that the events around First Constantinople and the Meletian Schism actually prove papal supremacy. Pope St. Dionysius, the 37th Pope in the line of St. Peter, was elected as Pope by a large majority in the month of October in 366. While Pope St. Dionysius was mostly known as the Pope who presided over the Council of Rome and the promulgation of the Vulgate, he was actually quite instrumental in the lead up to Constantinople I. Between 376 and 377, St. Jerome wrote a letter to Pope Dionysius on a request for the Pope to pronounce some sort of decree or creed that would be universally binding on the Church. He states,
"If you think fit, enact a decree, and then I shall not hesitate to speak of 3 hypostases. Order a new creed to supersede the Nicene, and then, whether we are Arians or Orthodox, one confession will do for us all."
The background to this request is interesting because it shows that contrary to Kyle's claims that,
we can see, again, the Bishop of Alexandria has jurisdiction on all of these, like the Bishop of Rome. Let the choice of the majority prevail. They're not just appealing, and the Bishop of Rome is not a dictator of the faith like it is in the Roman Catholic system.
there absolutely is a case of universal jurisdiction. Let's give some context to this quote. In 330, St. Eustathius of Antioch, a great friend of St. Athanasius and a defender of the Nicene Creed, was deposed and exiled by Eusebius of Nicomedia in a synod at Antioch on a false charge of modalism, or the doctrine that the three persons are actually just one person. From that point onward, Antioch was placed under the jurisdiction of multiple Arian and semi-Arian bishops. In 358, a guy by the name of Meletius was elected to be Pope of Antioch. As the church historian Socrates puts it,
they sent for Meletius and invested him with the bishopric of the church at Antioch. Now, he at first avoided all doctrinal questions, confining his discourses to moral subjects, but subsequently he expounded to his auditors the Nicene Creed and asserted the doctrine of the Homoousion. The emperor, being informed of this, ordered that he should be sent into exile.
Now when Meletius' exile was elected, there was a man by the name of Paulinus who was consecrated a bishop before his return, and a sort of debate in between the different Nicene Christians erupted. In this letter, we read that Jerome believed the Meletians to be Arians for their usage of hypostasis as equating person, At this time, many Nicene Christians equated the term hypostasis with essence, so the notion that there are three persons and three hypostases sound like Arianism, as Jerome states.
Just now, I am sorry to say, those Arians, the Campenses, are trying to extort from me, a Roman Christian, their unheard-of formula of three hypostases. I ask them what three hypostases are supposed to mean. They reply, three persons subsisting. I rejoin that this is my belief. They are not satisfied with the meaning. They demand the term. In the whole range of secular learning, hypostasis never means anything but essence.
It is also interesting to note that in this letter, Jerome appeals to the Pope's indefectibility as the basis by which the Meletians would have to accept this correction.
Evil children have squandered their patrimony. You alone keep your heritage intact. The fruitful soil of Rome, when it receives the pure seed of the Lord, bears fruit an hundredfold. But here, the seed grain is choked in the furrows, and nothing grows but darnel or oats.
And it gets better. The following quote is a clear affirmation of the divine institution of the papacy and the necessity to be in communion with Rome.
As I follow no leader save Christ, so I communicate with none but your blessedness, that is, with the chair of Peter. For this I know is the rock on which the church is built. Matthew 16:18. This is the house where alone the paschal lamb can be rightly eaten. Exodus 12:22. This is the ark of Noah, and he who is not found in it shall perish when the flood prevails.
Despite Jerome's pleas, Pope Damasus rejects this request from Ambrose and does not produce a new creed which forbids the usage of the formula of three hypostases. Jerome, double-texting Pope Damasus, attempts again to make a decision on this controversy and states,
I meantime keep crying. He who clings to the chair of Peter is accepted by me. Meletius, Vitalis, and Paulinus all profess to cleave to you, and I could believe the assertion if it were made by one of them only.
Only by looking at the first portion of the Meletian Schism, we have already established the notion that the Pope has the ability to 1. Promulgate a creed that surpasses Nicaea, 2. Can enforce its usage in Antioch, 3. That the Pope can do so on the basis of the indefectibility of the See of Rome, and 4. It can set the visible bounds of the Church. One name I mentioned, but did not explain, was Vitalis of Antioch, who is consecrated by Apollinaris of Laodicea. Apollinaris believed that Christ had no human soul, and thus had no complete human nature. Both the Meletians and the Paulinist supporters immediately deemed him as a heretic. As Father Clement Robb states,
A Roman synod held in the year 369 under Pope St. Damasus, 366-384, declared that the Father and the Son, ark of the one divine substance, together with the Holy Ghost. In another Roman synod held in 374, the Pope rejected the teachings of Macedonius as heretical.
and here, Macedonianism is referenced by St. Gregory of Nyssa in his On the Holy Trinity, which was originally said to Eustathius as,
But they reveal more clearly the aim of their argument. As regards the Father, they admit the fact that he is God, and that the Son likewise is honored with the attribute of Godhead. But the Spirit, who is reckoned with the Father and the Son, they cannot include in their conception of Godhead.
In the year 379, Theodosius I became the Eastern Roman Emperor. This changed everything. In 380, Theodosius contracted a deadly illness and began to take his faith a bit more seriously. So he promulgated the Edict of Thessalonica, which stated,
That religion which a pious belief from Peter to the present declares the holy Peter delivered to the Romans, and which it is evident the Pontiff Damasus and Peter, Bishop of Alexandria, a man of apostolic sanctity, follow. That is, that according to the apostolic discipline and evangelical doctrine, we believe in the deity of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost of equal majesty in a holy Trinity. Those who follow this law we command shall be comprised under the name of Catholic Christians.
Now it is interesting that the edict directly cites the Pope of Rome as a successor of St. Peter, and specifically one who has delivered the faith. In fact, Franco Manfred states,
The Edict of Thessalonica that was addressed to the people of Constantinople, recognized officially, for the first time and in the East, the exemplary value of Roman communion and Roman primacy, justified by apostolic tradition, already recognized by the Council of Antioch of 379, which subscribed to the Tome of Damasus. It indeed defined orthodoxy as communion with Damasus.
Now, certain Eastern Orthodox apologists, such as Craig Trullia, make the claim that the Meletian Schism disproves the claim made above for the following reason.
Ironically, St. Meletius, according to a letter from St. Jerome, never broke communion with the Pope. Yet, that same Pope recognized Paulinus and not Meletius. It is clear, via succession, who broke the peace and was the schismatic Paulinus, his ilk, and the popes of the late 4th century. Ironically, being that St. Meletius's line of succession eventually won out, he was vindicated by history. And this is a crystal clear example that Rome can indisputably go into schism, and no magical mega-chair powers can prevent it.
Basically, the argument being made is that since Pope Damasus supported Paulinus, who is effectively uncanonically misstated, the fact that the Pope favored Paulinus over Meletius, who is eventually reinstated as the Bishop of Antioch in a council which was not overseen by the Pope, is proof that the principle of unity with Rome is false. But there is a missing piece of evidence that puts a lot of context to the situation. In 379 AD, there was a council held by 150 bishops which signed onto a statement of faith recognized by Rome, which defended the Nicene faith in 377. It was reported as stating that,
This is the end of this letter, or exposition of the faith of the synod held at Rome under Pope Damasus and sent into the East, in which the entire Eastern Church, in a synod held at Antioch, believed with a like faith, and all, so consenting, confirmed this faith with their signatures. I, Meletius, Bishop of Antioch, consent to everything written above, so believing and teaching, and if anyone believes otherwise, let him be anathema.
so Meletius actually did sign off to a Roman council under pain of anathema, proving his orthodoxy. He was never actually out of communion with Rome. If you remember before, it was only a year after that Emperor Theodosius made it clear that anyone who held the Nicene faith was in communion with Rome. So the signature of Meletius shows that, with the absence of any explicit condemnation, Meletius, for all intents and purposes, was in full communion with Rome. Since the Pope refused to make any clear statement on this matter, the quarrel between Paulinus and Meletius continued. The supporters of both parties agreed to recognize either Meletius or Paulinus as the true bishop of Antioch, given the death of one or the other. As Socrates writes,
When this was done, a great disturbance arose, but afterwards the people were brought to unite on the following stipulations. Having assembled such of the clergy as might be considered worthy candidates for the bishopric, they found them 6 in number, of whom Flavian was one. All these they bound by an oath, not to use any effort to get themselves ordained, when either of the 2 bishops should die.
in a recent debate on the Papacy hosted by Reason and Theology Live, an Eastern Orthodox debater sums up what, from their side, they saw as going down during the aftermath of this decision made between Colonists and Meletius' supporters.
What I would contrast that with is the Meletian Schism, where Rome was on the wrong side, and it wasn't until, in fact, they were the only ones that weren't in communion with the church. After Constantinople won in 381, the bishop that they had appointed, Paulinus, was not recognized as the true bishop, the true patriarch of Antioch. Instead, it was St. Flavian, who was recognized as the true bishop of Antioch. And so the council decides, then Alexandria submits to the council's decision. Rome attempts to override this. And I can actually, if you'll let me, I can read their response back to it. This is in this, the synodical letter of Constantinople I. This is their response to Rome trying to assert this authority. It says, although with one voice of consent and respect, the bishops of the province and of the Eastern diocese have met together and canonically ordained this reverend and most religious Flavian as bishop over the most ancient and truly apostolic church in Syria, where the first noble name Christian was given. This rightful ordination was received the sanction of the General Council. So again, the Bishop of Rome tries to appoint his own bishop in Antioch, who's Paulanius. The council says, no, it's Flavian. And this was their response when Rome tries to assert that authority. It wasn't until several years later that Rome finally submits to the rest of the church. They were out of communion with the true Patriarch of Antioch. But Antioch was still in communion with the true church. So this idea that you have to be in communion with Rome to be in communion with the true church is not found in history. It contradicts history.
As we have demonstrated above, this recollection of history is quite inaccurate. First, Meletius and Colonus were both seen as in communion with Rome. Second, Paulinus was not formally installed by the Pope. Rather, the Pope simply preferred his nomination without ever responding to the requests to close the case in Antioch. Third, the Alexandrians had no love for Flavian originally due to Meletius' recension of the original deal with Paulinus, but both the Patriarch of Alexandria and Pope Damasus reconciled with Flavian at the same time.
Nevertheless, those who disliked Flavian, on account of his having violated his oath, held their assemblies apart. Meanwhile, Flavian left no stone unturned, as the phrase is, to bring these also under his control. And this he soon after effected, when he appeased the anger of Theophilus, then Bishop of Alexandria, by whose mediation he conciliated Damasus, Bishop of Rome, also. For both these had been greatly displeased with Flavian, as well for the perjury of which he had been guilty, as for the schism he had occasioned among the previously united people.
Fourth, the fact that the installation was even seen as problematic and Avidarius was being propped up by certain parties due to the breaking of the oath showed that the council did nothing to solve the issue at hand. In fact, in sources nearly 4 decades later, Rome was seen as solving the issue under Pope St. Syricius, finally choosing Flavian as the rightful bishop of Antioch, as Papacy bought this rights.
When the Church of Antioch had been in trouble a long time, so that there was continual passing to and fro for this, first under Meletius, afterwards under Flavian, it is notorious that the Apostolic See was consulted, by whose authority, after many things done by our Church, everyone knows that Flavian received the grace of communion, which he would have forfeited forever, had not writings gone from hence respecting it.
So today we've learned a couple of things about the Meletian Schism. The old adage, Roma locutor causa penitas, is quite useful when looking into history. Contrary to Eastern Orthodox claims, the First See is oftentimes the arbiters of these decisions. And 2, people stretch the evidence. A lot of the case of the Meletian Schism as being an issue for Roman Catholics is really built out of the inferences from silence. And 3, the Meletian Schism cannot be used as a defeater for papal supremacist claims. In fact, if anything, it proves our case. I want to close this video with a neat concession I've found by Truglia on this topic.
Our modern debate is always East versus West, Orthodox versus Roman Catholic. I don't think we're actually seeing the bigger point. Now, I think if I were in your seat right now, you could say, well, this is consistent with the Vatican I view of the papacy, and you can certainly make that argument. I'm just making the historical point that this was the relevant point at issue had to do with unity coming from singular patriarchy.
I would like to thank Duong and Bellarmite for looking over my script and providing some feedback. Try checking out their channels. Consequently, if you'd like to support this channel, the PayPal link is down below. These videos take some time to make, and it would be nice to break even on them. Thank you. God bless.